Hey everyone, and welcome back to this exciting live tutorial. Currently, I'll just have Katana open. Most of you guys, I guess, know the template already, but I will go through it anyways. And today's session will be more a Q&A, so I'll be reading the comments, and definitely I'll be trying to show the workflows, the tips and tricks, and whatever. So feel free to ask any questions, and then we can get going. So obviously I will just wait a bit until a few more people show up. But I've seen already a few people in the chat, or two. Well, two is a few, so we'll wait a bit. Hey Philippe. Hey guys. What is Katana? Katana is like a look dev lighting tool. It's developed by the Foundry. It is very friendly, like it's not very convoluted. It's pretty simple to use, especially as an artist. You just have a few nodes to work with and you can get going actually. I'm just readjusting the chat. Yeah, I got a new mic actually. And is it actually on both speakers or is it just on one? Because I'm not sure about the settings actually. Both. Perfect. Cool. Oh, I need to follow on the chat now. It's getting a lot more involved here. Hey guys, so cool. Hey, also a few people from the Slack group, which is pretty nice. I'm not sure if everyone knows about it, but I have created a small community on Slack where you can share your knowledge, ask questions. It's more like a little group where you just get feedback for your work, I guess. So this is how it looks on my end. And currently we have 417 people. Obviously, not all of them are active. I get statistics, but I guess half or a third of them are the active guys. And you can see we can share renders and feedback, or where's the feedback? So in here people share their renders and you get feedback on all that stuff, which is pretty nice, and it's growing, which is a nice group to work in actually. So yeah, it's kind of like Discord, but it's more a team thing. I think I'm not exactly sure what Discord is. Like I know you can link it right to Patreon or to Bitbucket and stuff like that, so I'm not entirely sure. Is it possible to create an Arnold shader in Maya and import it into Katana? As far as I know, no, it won't be possible to just import it. But obviously you can create a little converter Python script which does it. So in Katana, I would guess you would have a little Python thing which reads from an MA file or from your Maya file, where you have the shader, and then you read through it and create the shader and then just convert the values over, because it's a bit different. Like in my look dev group in here, let's just jump into this guy. So this would be, for instance, a shader. Where is it? Parameters. I think it's not there. So in here, I guess you would need to reassign all this stuff manually, and I'm not sure if there's a really converter. So you would need to loop through the Python script and just reconnect those values. Okay, so what are the pros and cons of using Katana instead of Maya? I would say for individual artists, the price is a big con, because it's expensive, and for Maya you can have the subscription fee or whatever. But other than that, if you are just into look dev and lighting, it is a way cleaner interface. You just have a few sliders to control your scene. Like Maya has everything in it, like animation, rigging, modeling, and all that stuff. And Katana is mostly look dev and lighting. So it's pretty straightforward. You have your geometry in, so your alembic caches or whatever comes in from the top, which is in my case my characters here, and I have set some nice templates. So I have this drop down menu with my test geometry, and obviously if you have a shot or a bigger object, you would you would export it from your package, ideally Maya or Houdini or whatever, alembic in, and then you would just load it in from here, and then you would have your scene. And at this point here you would have your material, which would be your assignments, your generic lights, and then your render settings. So it is pretty easy to work with, and you can just swap out the alembics and you have your new assets in the scene, or swap out cameras, and it's all pretty simple. And Maya is just more convoluted, and it's got so much more sliders and windows and whatever. Selecting just pressure, that's good. Oh, Nathan, yeah. Regarding, is it important to be fluent in OSL and Python? I would say it helps tremendously if you have that experience or that knowledge, and if you can write your own OSL shaders, it's a tremendous help, just because you also understand how a shader works and you can quickly find workarounds, how to make things better, and it's just a big plus if you know Python and OSL. OSL is a pretty new thing, so if you can master that now, you will really benefit from that for sure. The workspace URL for Slack coming up. Coming up somewhere. Let's just put this down. Thought I had it open. And there's also an invite, so if you go on my webpage, or well, I share both things quickly. Guess people was faster. So that's the link, and let's see if I can find the share. So if you go on lightshader.de, at the bottom you find a big Slack logo like this. So that's the Lightshader page at the bottom, big Slack, and that's the invite link. So you can just click that and you will be joining. So let's follow up. I do not have time to stay for live for this thing for tutorials. There are possibilities with Material X. I haven't worked with Material X yet, but I look really forward to doing so for sure. Not sure what that is. I'm just reading up on the comments, sorry. That's the link. Importing stuff from like XGen stuff into Katana. I haven't done so myself, so I'm not entirely sure. But Yeti stuff, I'm pretty sure you can just export curves and then load them in Katana. You can use Alembic, and that should be able to load in curves as well. And then you just assign, I think Arnold has this curve collector, if it's actually transported here. Not sure if it's in here. Curvature. Thought there was something like that. Definitely in Maya. I can just jump over to Maya a second. In Maya you have Arnold curve collector here, and this guy. So you select your curves, and then you actually can you have all the settings for hair. For instance, you can choose your width, your ribbon types, and stuff like that inside of Maya. Oh, really? Not found? That's interesting. Huh. Yeah, I can see that. If you click on the Lightshader Slack link, it's not found, but I guess you need to use the invite. Let me just double check. Oh, Python is not mandatory. Definitely not. Lots of people at work, for instance, they don't know Python. They are just artists, and it's totally good too. If you're a good artist, you don't need to have Python. But from my understanding, it's just helpful to understand the technical side of things, like how does things work, and it just opens up a bit more your horizon on how to work with things. But it's not mandatory for sure not, but it gives you plus points, definitely. Yeah, so Xgen can be imported as well through Alembic. Is Katana free? You can have a non-commercial for sure. So, and there's also this Slack group actually, which is an app. But yeah. So, I did not really prepare anything for a live session, but I thought you had a few more questions on do a few things. But I can quickly show you the template or like shading in Katana if you haven't seen it yet. So you can see I'm currently running on a trial, Arnold trial, so you get the watermarks here, which is not a biggie. You can still get the render, so that's totally fine. I've got scene variables up here, so I can quickly change between assets. And actually I have a live session, or actually there is a tutorial. There might be a tutorial on how I set this template up. So that's also helpful. So if I can start the render now, you should see it should just swap out the assets. And this is how you would work in your shot environment or whatever. If you have a different scene, you would just change a shot and you have a different asset or different element caches or whatever. And this is supposed to be like a dented copper shader. Obviously doesn't work on humans, but yeah. Nathan, I responded to your question already. I think it's very helpful to be able to be fluent in OSL and Python. Helps quite a lot for sure. So in the look dev, currently I just have one big look dev scene. So this is my simple template, and then I have a look dev subgroup, and in here I have all the shaders for all the live sessions I did, for all the tutorials. So here's my reference, for instance. If I show this would be my copper reference image. So you can see it's actually corroded, and you get this green effect, what happens when copper gets corroded with air or whatever. And I'm planning to do something similar to this. So that's something I'm working on. And obviously you just create a new shader and then you connect it up, and then you can play around with those sliders. Philippe, can you import particle instances or some kind of particles? Katana is a read-only thing, so you can only import stuff. So when you have Houdini caches, it's mostly Alembic stuff. They will be exported and they will go back into Katana, and then you have all the caches right inside of Katana. And ideally, the Houdini FX guys or some like whoever is creating particles for you, they will export the instance geometry as well. If you just want to have particles, you can render particles in here. I'm not entirely sure how Arnold handles that. If you can, what shaders you can assign to that, I'm not pretty sure. But what you cannot do is do the instancing in Katana. That's something which does not work. So you cannot say you want a cube for the particles. Or if it's possible, I don't know how to do it. Let's say that. Katana and Nuke is totally different, I would say. Obviously, you can do comp in Katana, but this is mostly for the lighting artists to have a feel on how it will be looking when it's comped. So you can think of Katana as a render tool which just outputs the EXR images, which will be read in Nuke. So obviously you have your basic 2D stuff in here. If I can find it, is it image? Yeah, so you have all these things, merge and over and all these 2D operations in here. But I wouldn't say it's, I don't know, I wouldn't say you can actually do compositing in here. And the bigger benefit about Katana is that it is very similar to Nuke, so it's very node based. You can quickly swap out assets, and that's the difference in Maya. In Maya, you have, oh well, they started having nodes like this, but it's still not the same thing. Your geometry are still objects in your scene. It's kind of a layer thing, right? So you cannot easily switch out stuff unless you have a pipeline. Some developers who created some nice integration using references, and you can quickly swap them out and stuff like that. So for personal work at home, most of the time I do lighting in here, because for simple scenes it's fine. But as soon as it gets complicated and you have to use render setup and do crazy things, it can get pretty over the top quite quickly, I would say. So let's see if there are there any questions regarding that. Let's see what we got. I'm currently just checking the comments. So what is the count? Currently 42 people watching, which is nice. Welcome everyone again if you just tuned in. So I'm not sure if you have seen the poll, but there's supposed to be some cards on the stream, and there is like a little poll in it. So I was asking what do you want to see next? So if I bring this in, I'm not sure how you see it on your machine, but there are these cards on the right if you press the eye thingy. So this would be kind of the next tutorials I'm planning. So a next bigger series I am planning is something to do with render setup. Nothing Katana though. So it would be setting up layers properly, like having a shadow pass, different lights, I don't know, nighttime, daytime, something like this, where you have different render layers, maybe a car scene or something, and then I want to integrate that at Tutz's tutorials, I guess. So, and then I want to integrate that into a plate and using CryptoMat and all that fancy stuff and bring it all into Nuke and maybe do some particles in Nuke, maybe some a little bit of compositing, I guess. So this is a planned larger series. For smaller things, I'm trying to do something new now on my channel, which is giving like kind of a quick tip section where I will be having like 1 to 5 minutes short videos on things, for instance, about render setup, like how to quickly do that, how to do that. So that's an idea I'm thinking of doing. So let's see, for instance, like how do you create a collection, how do you do that, blah blah blah, and what is a collection. So that's a new thing, because render setup is pretty new and I'm not sure how many people use it actually. I guess in companies they will make use of this because it is kind of helpful, and it is similar to the Katana way of doing things. You've got your collections, you got in Maya and Katana you have also collections, which are like sets or certain things which are grouped together in here. So that would be one. And then yeah, exactly. So that's the thing. That is one concern. Like the tutorials I'm doing, yes, they are informative, but they are very long, and there is like, I've got like all the tips and tricks are hidden in those 40 minutes, and it's not always very easy to find those things. So people keep asking the same questions because they don't really watch the videos. They mostly skip through them, or I don't know, and they miss things. So the plan is to have these short and snappy things like, how do I do that? And then the answer. So nothing crazy. This would be just to have a lot of short clips on YouTube, actually. If you have a certain issue, that's the answer. Might you do a comprehensive X-Gen hair tutorial? Comprehensive is a bit difficult as I am not a groomer. So I'm not 100% sure how to make a complicated looking hairstyle. That's a problem. Definitely I can do the shading of this, like using curve IDs, or I don't know, creating interesting hair shaders and lighting and stuff. But I was actually trying to do grooming in Houdini, which is very convenient and nice to work with. So I'm just like trying things out, but I would not try myself on. Yeah, exactly. Check out Tarkan. He's a friend of mine, and he's a pretty awesome groomer. He works as a, I think, lead groomer as currently, and he worked on Jungle Book, so he knows his things. And he also has a Patreon page where he's actually posting his tutorials, and it's pretty insane. Yeah, so let's see what we can do in Katana. So yeah, so I have my base shader, and on top the base shader stuff is mostly assigning to the reference viz I have. So if I go to the viewer and scene graph, oh, it's so packed up in here. Geometry, I'm just switching to my reference ball, and you can see the assets switch out immediately, which is pretty helpful. These are my reference balls, and then I have the asset here. Floor, for instance. Perspective, and that's currently the scene. Let's choose the shader ball base. Yeah. Takes a while to load up because it's a crazy asset. Yeah. So this is the scene, and then after that I have my lights. So I have my default lights in here, and then I have a switch, and the switch is resembled to this guy, so I can just switch HDRs as well pretty quickly, changing light setups, and then I have my render settings from low to high in here. There's no need for caps, but Katana, I would say, is easy to use. It depends how familiar you are with Nuke, I would say. But I think it's pretty simple, especially if you are just doing lighting. If you just do lighting, you create a gaffer node. That's where you create lights and manipulate them. So in here you create a new light. Let's say Arnold Rect, if I find it. I'm not sure. Arnold Disc Barn. Mesh, where is it? Quad light. There it is. And then you have your quad light. Let's see if it's in here. There it is, quad light, and it's somewhere in the origin. So what you can do now, you can just like look through that light, position this guy, go to render settings, whatever. It's pretty basic, I would say. And then you have your default settings. You can have the same as in Maya. So it's pretty simple if you just do lighting. And most of the times it's lighting or look dev, and look dev, it's kind of the same thing. You create your look dev node. So you create a surface shader and assign it using material assign and changing values. It's pretty simple. Oh, that's a good question. How would you decide to use textures versus a shader? So the thing is, procedurals most of the time look always like a pattern, like they are repeating itself after some point. You can break them up to a certain degree, but it's at some point it just does not help. So I would use procedurals to break up specs in a kind of broad way. But if you want to have like detailed, like for obviously skin needs to have a texture, but if you have like a metal and you want to have certain rust spots, you can use textures are always a lot faster to read than lots of procedurals. So let's say you have 10 procedurals layered on top of each other. It takes longer to render because the shader needs to trace all the rays and do the shader hits and stuff. So it will be slower if you have lots of procedurals. So the thing is, if you use, for instance, Substance Designer, you can use a procedural approach to create these very interesting rust effects or dirt effects or whatever. And in the end, it is still outputting a texture file, so a PNG or EXR file, which you then read into your shader. And that's the way I would do it. And if you have complicated shaders, like let's say the Iron Man suit or whatever, you can start off with procedural things, but most of the time it's all painted because you have just that more control and it's a lot faster to render these big assets. Generalists in the film industry, I think they still play a pretty big role, especially companies are trying to save money nowadays. So people who have experience in more than one field are recommended, or they get plus points for the application for sure. Like I, for instance, work as look dev and lighting, and I do some technical like show 2D stuff. So I have the upper end of the pipeline kind of. I can work in all those three areas, and I can also do a little bit of comping. I never applied as a comp, but I'm I'm sufficient in compositing. So in the worst case, I can also work in comp. And as a generalist, if you can do modeling, if you can do rigging, if you can do cloth and all that stuff, it's such a big benefit, especially companies are trying, as I said, to save money. So if you can do all these things in one person, I think it's a big benefit. So you don't work with the lighting from Maya, you recreate the lighting. So that's the thing, like you either do lighting in Maya or you do lighting in Katana. You wouldn't use both packages. So I don't know. Well, you don't need to recreate anything. You do the lighting from the beginning in Katana, or you do the lighting from beginning in Maya. So there's no need to bring stuff over unless you just want to have the assets. Obviously, you can create and model and animate all the assets inside Maya. And if you want to, you can just export them, Alembic export from here to an Alembic, and then just import these guys into Katana, which is how people do it nowadays. Welcome from China. You ever dabble in real-time work? Not so much. I played a bit in Unity. But that's also like I just played around like just to see how it kind of works and what Unity really is. But no, I haven't done any real work in real time. If you're creating lighting setup for a product, how do you set up area light, ambient, position? So all these renderers nowadays are physical based, or some are actually physical like Maxwell. So it just makes sense to adopt realistic approaches. So if I do some product shoots, I do like studio light, something like this. Go to images, and I just actually look a lot of on references, like how do you create this. So let's see, like this guitar for instance, it's maybe a bit small, so I'll just zoom in here. You can see like they have a top light, they've got lights actually everywhere, it's like a white box. So these are the principles I follow, and then when I have something set up, I just do some tweaks to it to make it look nice. You see there are so many ways of doing studio lighting. But what I most of the time do, let me just actually read up on some film noir. Film noir is like how they did lighting in the 60s or 40s or 80s or whatever. So this is very helpful if you want to learn lighting. Like, it gives you like really good insight on how to make light work in a pleasing way. So for instance, this guy is rim lit, or like has a strong key from the left, and he actually has no fill light, so he's just like, you can focus on his face a lot. And let's see what we see in this video. So there are lots of ways, and in here you get so many ideas how to do lighting. Let me just see if there's better ways. Like, if you just go on YouTube, so this is a strong rimlet one, fill light. Yeah, I don't know. On YouTube I found quite a few ones. Oh, actually I thought that's the one here. Yeah, that's the one I was talking about. So 3-point lighting is the standard setup. Fill light, and then it tells you like, this is that, that's the key, and then rim and whatever. And if you follow these principles, you can really apply the stuff to your basic lights. And so what I mostly do is I have a key which gives light direction, then I have a soft fill from one side, and mostly what I do in my renders, I always have a little rim edge. And then obviously you can play with colors as well, like warmer colors for the key, colder colors for the rim and stuff like that. A live critique session. It's not a bad idea, honestly. The thing is, I just want to do like work with one person then. So maybe I need to do some challenges on my website or somewhere, and the winner, maybe on my YouTube channel actually, for the best comment or whatever, the winner there is granted a live session with me, and then he can show me his renders, and then we talk about it and do a live critique on how I would make it better or something. Yeah, that's a good idea actually. An alembic is a geometry cache, so it's like an OBJ, but it has more in it, definitely. So you can export caches like animations. Let's see, export all to alembic. And it supports curves, and actually let me just see if I can find their website. Alembic.io, is that the one? I think so. It's from Sony and ILM. So if you want to read up on this, here you go. So does community experience generalist or some person work justifying skills? It depends. If you want to work in a smaller studio, I guess they also like to have generalists because they can help in lots of fields. And yeah, they will want to see something. So if you have personal work, if you have done some nice renderings or some projects, obviously show this stuff. Lighting surfacing in the gaming industry. If you want to do that, like they slowly they merge into one. So gaming and VFX, they slowly merge together. So you kind of need to have the same skill set for gaming, the same way as you need to have the skill set for VFX. But if you want to apply for games, I would recommend you to have like gaming assets. Like, don't show VFX stuff if you want to apply for a game position. So it would be very helpful if you have some gaming characters, if you model them, if you painted the textures or whatever. Have some nice turntables, like you see the Warcraft trailers. They are so cinematic nowadays. It's kind of VFX already. For an entry-level lighting artist, what would you recommend to prioritize learning and putting on a showreel? So I guess entry level means no experience in film production, so no work on VFX movies and stuff like that. Um, I would recommend to work on um, some kind of VFX tutorial. So if you go to on FX PhD, obviously it costs a bit, and maybe there are also different websites to do it. Um, but on here they have very helpful courses, and actually I use them to get better as well. So they've got real life VFX scenarios where they show you how to do things. Let's see if you go to VFX stuff, and you can see this is very helpful, and you can actually use this stuff in your reel. So if you browse through this, you can find lots of things for lighting and VFX and comping, and this stuff here will help you definitely to create a show reel, and obviously do tutorials, do personal projects, go out, film stuff, do some nice lighting work, interaction, and all this crazy things. And then I'm pretty sure you will get into the film industry. Cool idea. I haven't heard of multiverse. Multiverse. What is it called? Exporter? Or have I heard about it? Let's see. Quickly read display VP2 assemblies. Sounds very interesting. Procedural rendering, Houdini and Maya and Katana, interpret curve and point. So curve and point data can easily be exported. That's cool. Animation sim look to full shading. Wow, even shading networks. Impressive. Okay, that's the bridge. Material X is the bridge. So if you don't use X, it's you can't do it, I guess. But still, very interesting. Version. Yeah, I definitely read up on that. Clarice. I've seen demos of Clarice. I haven't worked with it myself in production, but what they showcased us in the demo was very impressive. Really huge environments. You can, like, if there are like millions of trees, you can just instance them and create another million. You can easily position stuff, and it's all, you've got one big viewport, and you have different viewing modes of this, like wireframe or shaded, or then you have like a semi-rendered version, and then you have the full render version, which is a fully ray tracer in the viewport, and you can easily just move like stuff around. So if you have a big character or whatever in the viewport, and it's rendering live, and you can just easily move it, and you can duplicate it and scale this guy, and there is no problem at all in Clarice, and it just works. And I'm not sure what the limitations are, though. I haven't really, as I said, worked in it in production, so I couldn't really test it, but it is a nice package for sure. I would prefer Google for websites for lighting mood references. Like, Google is your friend. I'm not kidding. Like, type in Google lighting techniques 80s, 90s. How is film noir working? What are the Michael Bay, like, how does Michael Bay want whatever? You can Google everything, and you get references for all this stuff. If you want to, what I also do, I follow lots of photography accounts. Like, F-Stoppers is a pretty big photography community. And in here you can find often how to make good examples on how to make nice lighting and all that stuff. So if you want to be better in lighting, definitely check out photograph websites, learn how to make lights work for you, and there are lots of ways to get better, I'm sure. How to import hair for Katana. here in Katana, I think you can just export curves and import them in Katana and render them from there. Again, I haven't done it yet myself, but I will test it out, and if I find a good easy way to do it, I will make a video about it. But I'm pretty sure you would just export the cache. I think Alembic actually works pretty easy. So let's just try something quickly. Curve tools, curve tool. Not sure where it is in space now, but that's okay. So curve 1 and sphere 1, let's do cache, Alembic, export selection, current frame, UVs, world space, export, work, training, live. Okay, let's see what we get. Maya, ABC, ABC. So here's the link. Let me just copy this. Head over to Katana. Do Alembic in. Paste the asset here. ABC. Let's see what we get. If we get anything at all. Curve is here. So there's a curve. And we got the sphere. So I think if you use like XGen and you export all the stuff as curves, you can easily just grab them here and render them. So many questions. I hardly can follow up. Okay, so how to do SSS for Grape. So actually, making a grape shader is on my list. Grape fruit. Is that a fruit? I guess so. It's not called grape. Bundle. Yeah. So. Also, a good tip if you don't know, you can go to tools, size larger than 2 megapixels or even larger, and then you get like high quality images, like pretty big ones, which is awesome for reference. Unfortunately, why this is so big, but there we go. So Graves, you can see it's pretty complex actually. So I would because the new SSS model in Arnold is so much better, I would try this again using this approach. But a good way of thinking is because there is like kind of 3D noise inside the Grape itself, so you could use actually volumes to shade the object. So you can create a little volume sphere. I hope that makes sense, and assign a texture to this, and then have this volume inside of the geometry, and then you have like a real 3D interaction of yeah, exactly, of these veins or whatever. But a basic thing would be, I guess, if we just quickly do it in Maya. Let's just hide the ball. See what I can do in a quick session. So let's see where the camera is. Create a sphere. That's my Grape. Let's just scale this in the Y. Rotate this a bit like this. Okay. So save. So this is now the Grape. So right click, assign favorites, standard surface shader. Render. Okay, so you can see I've got a strong key from the left. If I just render this region, so if you well, I won't be doing a tutorial now. So I'm just quickly trying to do the SSS stuff. So for SSS, you don't have diffuse. You have a code. Let's just disable all. That's the way I work. I disable everything and then I slowly bring them back in. So scattering on, surface color, let's say we have ketchup, and then this is kind of the base. Obviously you would plug in here a nice texture in here. The radius would be the depth, like how much does it scatter, and a grape, I guess this is now a value of 4, which means it scatters 4 units, and RGB, most of them in red, which is kind of what a grape does as well. A grape has maybe a bit more blue, less green, something like this. And then let's switch to random walk, and you can desaturate the top thing a bit. And this is just the scattering part, so be aware of that. And I need to subdivide this guy. So I go to Cat Clark, so this is now subdivided. If I check the wireframe, you can see it's nice and smooth. I can also go to my SSS direct, so I can only see the SSS happening. And then obviously I can play around with the scale. So it's hard to see any edges because the grape is pretty round. So, but you can see it's actually working, I would say. And then you can see if I go back to the image. So I just did the blood part, right? The flesh part. I think that's what you call it. So the next step would be to put the coat on it. So you get these. I'm not sure what the white stuff is. Like you get this on grapes. I'm not sure exactly what it is. So if this is the base layer, you can now do the white stuff on top, or you can either do it with a layer shader, or you can do it in the diffuse. So if I would add a, let's just disable this for now, bring this guy back in, go back to beauty. So what I'm trying to do now is add the this white stuff, whatever it is. So I'm just playing with the weight, and let's just create a noise. AI noise, out color goes into base color. Okay. Let's add some detail to this. Okay, and then we do some clamping. I hope the connection is still fine, because sometimes it does not really work as good when rendering, but I think it's fine. So where is my stuff? So here's a noise. So what I like to do, I create a remap. Remap, or how's it called? Range? Yeah, AI range. Input color, output color. So I'm doing it now pretty quick. I hope you follow. So okay, let's try to do more details. Okay, so let's say this is the white stuff on it, and the rest is black, which is nice. And then I need to create an invert, I think, if I want to do this like this. Yeah. Oh well, we just put it on top. So you can see now you don't see the white stuff anymore because the SSS is fully on top of that. So what you can do, or what I will do, is I will invert it. So I create an reverse, which inverts the input. And the output red goes into the weight in here, which looks like this. So now I have the white stuff on top, which does not look beautiful, but it's kind of showing the principles. And then on top of that, you would create your spec, roughness, I guess. And then you can add a code layer on top. Maybe make it a bit darker, a bit rougher. And let's say you want to have a coat, which you enable as well. And this is now the wet pass. And on here, you can easily add some roughness, whatever. So let's just try a noise. As I said, it's not beautiful, but this is kind of the technique which should work. So if I put the out color red into code roughness, like so, and I look through the roughness, details, distortion, and then playing with those values. So white means very rough, so let's see what we get now. Not much. Yeah, it's a very ugly grape, but I hope it shows the technique. Yeah, and obviously the more you spend time on it, the better it will look, and yeah. So it's nothing compared to this guy, but I hope it's kind of, you see the principles, how it works. Redshift, I haven't worked with Redshift in a while, so I can't really say anything about Redshift. Shade and feathers. I know Yeti is pretty good with feathers, but I haven't worked with that either. I worked with V-Ray in do you have any thoughts on V-Ray and RenderMan? So I have worked in V-Ray in a long time, like on version 2. I think I worked pretty long time with that, and I was pretty happy. But it's not like I was always annoyed by final gather passes to recache all this stuff. But nowadays it's all fully ray traced, so I haven't worked with V-Ray since. I use RenderMan daily at work, so I'm pretty happy. I like RenderMan because it has the complexity in the shaders where you can create really advanced shaders with RenderMan, because they have all these little options, and they have now the bump roughness thingy, which is pretty awesome, which I still need to test out. And Arnold is just very robust, and it just works, and you can still do advanced shaders easily in Arnold, but you need to plug in nodes, and not all the artists are happy to do that. So RenderMan has like an Uber shader where you have all the parameters in one spot, and in Arnold you would need to plug in a few things and do some ranges and offsets, and to make that look beautiful. So there's a bit difference in that, but other than that, Arnold is super stable, and the same as RenderMan. So I would be having a hard time if I would need to choose between Arnold and RenderMan. Yeah, but I like that Arnold is very open, and it tries to implement quickly things. Last Jedi, I loved it. A few weird parts in it, but other than that, I was pretty happy. Okay. Flakes, like you mean like flakes, like changing the normals of an area? I guess there should be a shader the same as in Arnold. Oh, you mean Arnold, okay. Well, how they work is, let's do that. That's actually should be pretty simple. So I just assigned a new shader. Okay, so it's called, how was it called? Was it called Flakes? Yeah, I think so. Render. Yeah. So I just plugged it into the base color now, just to show you what it's actually doing. Oh, that's new. IOR. Interesting. So obviously the scale is the scale of each little flake. And first thing what you would need to consider is in what coordinate space you want to have it. If you want to have it on object space, it will follow along with the object. You see it's connected. And if you flakes, if you put it on world, for instance, change the scale, then it swims through the noise, right? So if you have an animation, this will totally look really weird. So make sure it's on pref or object or UVs, so it's sticking to the object. Let's find a value here. So UVs also, it's sticking. So I like to use pref actually. So it's the same way it sticks, but it's the object UV space. And then density is how many you want. Let's just make the size a bit smaller. And density, you can see they add more spots. So if it's on one, everything is a flake, which is how car paint works. I think maybe car paint is a bit less if you want to see the diffuse through the metal to the reflection to the flakes. I'm not sure what depth is, honestly. I think you have, oh, that's new. I think they updated the shader. IOR is the reflection gives off, and then you have the normal randomize. So if it's on 0, there will be no offset in the normal, and the more you introduce the normal randomize, you can think of these little flakes being rotated in 180 degrees in any direction. So the higher this value, the more it will reflect other things. So this is how it works. Let's see how RenderMan. I don't know how RenderMan works with GPU. What would you say is important for getting a junior job as look dev lighting artist? Well, it's always good to have a good understanding on how lighting works, and obviously you should have a little portfolio which you can show off, and I don't know, it should be something interesting to look at, not too long, like maximum 2 minutes. Show like 5 to 8 different things in your reel, not too long, because the recruiters, they don't have that time to look at a 5-minute reel, so they will also skip through 2-minute reels. So they just want to see what you can do in a short amount of time. So I guess they spend maybe 10 seconds in your reel clicking through it, and if they like it, they will reply to you. So make sure your first impression is a good one. So have, I don't know, as I said before, some nice personal projects, some tutorials which helped you a lot and stuff like that. Do you prefer to add your bokeh, blur, and all that stuff in Maya, or do you want to make this in Nuke? I tend to do all this stuff in Nuke because I want to have fast render time. So if I would render depth of field, I need to crank up the samples, and if I want to render motion blur and bokeh or depth of field, I need to go really high on the samples, and it's just killing render times. And nowadays the 2D blur packages like PG bokeh or the lens blur and a Z blur or something in Nuke, they are pretty good. And especially now with deep, you can render out your deep data from Maya or Arnold actually, and then you can use the deep stuff to calculate the defocus. And so I would always, for production stuff, do it in Nuke just to save render times. Motion blur is a different thing because it's 2D packages that can do translational motion blur pretty good, like X and Y animations pretty good. But as soon as a Z-axis is involved, or deformations or rotational animations, the motion blur really lacks of quality. So you can render motion blur most of the time in the package, or that's what I would do. How long have you been teaching? How did teaching? Well, I started my YouTube, like the proper YouTube stuff, the tutorials, I think almost 2 years ago now. And that's kind of the first time I really did public tutorials. But at work, obviously, I do lots of, I don't give tutorials at work, but I help my colleagues with things, and obviously that's where I learn stuff. So, but I'm not entirely sure like how I get used to it. Just repetition is a thing. And the first times it's weird to listen to yourself, like when you do the edits and stuff. I guess you know what I'm talking about. Like if you record your voice and you listen to it, it sounds so weird. But after like some time, you get just used to it, and it sounds like a normal voice. So I guess it just takes a bit of time. Is it possible to do some RenderMan tutorials? Sure, I was thinking about that anyways, to do something like that, to do some RenderMan stuff as well. mostly my channel is now Arnold people, so if I would show RenderMan, I'm not so sure if they find it cool. So I need to do maybe slowly a transition. Like I also started with Katana, but Katana is Arnold. And so if I might be doing like a RenderMan channel, or I don't know. I can definitely do procedurals in RenderMan. But for now it's all Arnold based, I guess. By deep stuff you mean Z depth? No. So Z depth is just a depth value, right? It's like 1 pixel and it describes the depth from the camera. That's what Z is, right? That's a camera depth. What I mean by deep is each pixel has 3 informations. It has RGB and it has a Z information. Let's see if I can. Do I have something to show? No, I don't really think so. So the benefit of having deep is you can the depth of focus plugin like PG Bokeh, you can directly read in your scene data as deep, and based on that it automatically creates a way more accurate depth of field, especially if you have objects behind each other. Okay, so if I would render now depth of field for this guy, and obviously in a 3D package it works fine because it knows where the edges are, but if you have a 2D package and you use only the Z pass, you get some weird edges, especially on overlapping objects. So the deeper they go into space, the weirder these edges will get. And if you use a deep approach, it works just a lot better. I'm not sure why technically, I don't know why, but it just works better. The question kind of repeats. At what point shouldn't be you using procedural stuff? So texturing in the industry is always happening. So we will always have in the lighting scene, there won't be procedural shaders. So you'll always get a baked down version of the texture. Well, let's continue. So it depends. Like if you have a full frame asset, and obviously you cannot get away with procedurals on that. So at some point you will need to paint it. And for background objects, I would always go for procedural because it's just easier to set up, and you can use occlusion, and you can use the world space passes to create some aging and rusting and all that stuff. So that is all possible. But I would still prefer using Substance Designer to just generate procedurally based textures and then export those maps and plug them into the shader. You can do variations and use user data to switch out the textures. So that's something you can do. But like obviously for my tutorials, I just want to show you procedural techniques to do things. But in the real world, if you want to have a real nice VFX shot and it should look realistic, you most of the time need to paint things on top the procedural stuff. I currently, do you have other useful plugins as PG Bokeh? So no, I just use PG Bokeh or the Z Blur. There's some built-in one now, Z Defocus. I think it's called Z Defocus actually. Yeah, it's from the Foundry, so that's this guy, Z Defocus, where you can actually specify the depth. We're just doing like this. And I just think PG Bokeh looks a lot nicer. It takes a while longer to render, but the results are pretty amazing. Can you share some way of doing lighting when you get a blank movie shot with all assets? So you mean I have a grayscale render or a shaded, like I've got all the assets in my scene but there's no lights, right? That's the question, I guess. So the first, like in a production, at first I look at the reference images we got or the HDRs we got, and the chrome and gray balls. So that's something I look at first, and after that I just reposition or align the HDR with the plate and make sure that the lighting matches, and then I slowly add. So if that is set up, so if my spheres, my reference spheres match the plate spheres, then I know my lighting is correct. And after that, I will add some beauty lights. So if the HDR isn't doing its job properly, I will add or start adding some beauty lights like fill lights, key lights, rim lights separately on top of the HDR. So this is kind of the everyday work I do. So I match the spheres, and after that I'll add beauty lights to this. Are you good with mesh and motion graphics? I think about doing a series on that particular area. So I worked in After Effects a while back, and I did lots of motion graphics, did some music videos and stuff like that. Mostly Andrew Kramer inspired stuff, obviously, which everyone knows or is doing, I guess. But since Mesh has been introduced into Maya, I haven't really worked with it. I played around with it, did some, I think it's called instancing or these replicators, and did some funky animations. But I don't feel too comfortable about it doing a proper tutorial about it, so I don't think so. I use Triplanar quite a bit to get nicer textures on for instance, pretty architectural stuff like buildings, like especially if you see this HDR. Triplanar would work pretty nice for this, just to get these nice nice textures assigned. But well, it's something which works definitely, but I haven't used it as much. Mesh with megascans, yeah. I used XGen actually to distribute objects. So if I had little pebbles or stones from megascans, I would use XGen instancing or scattering to position that. But I haven't tried the mesh placing node yet. But I'm pretty sure it's interesting. Let's see. I actually have no idea what I'm doing now, so we'll see. Editor. Place node, you said. Place node. Placer. Oh, you can paint the one? You can paint. Oh, that is cool. So, if I drag this guy, okay, I don't want to paint. Dang. Okay, I can see you can actually paint where you want to have meshes, which is nice, and you can change the radius and the blah blah blah. Yeah, it's pretty cool. I need to work with that for sure. That's interesting. Substance designer tutorials, please, if you get some time. I got substance designer tutorials, which I guess you have not seen yet. So if you go on my light shader website, which is my main tutorial page nowadays, you can go to training, tutorials, and then somewhere should be my fire hydrant, hopefully. There it is. Substance designer, texture creation. And in here I do actually 3 different shaders in Substance Designer, and I blend them together and then I render them. Is that supposed to be here? I don't think so. Interesting. I need to fix this, I guess. So I think in the end I bring it into Arnold, into Maya. Yeah, it's not here, interestingly. Yeah, but I show a tutorial on that, so check it out. Ian Waters, I know him actually. I'll definitely check it out. Iron Waters. I think he's German, isn't he? Or maybe not. Oh yeah, cool. I'll check this stuff out for sure. Okay, alongside the random node, can you pass me a control procedure shader for rocks and tree box? What is the most important thing you have to do? So what is the most important thing to have a realistic shader and render? So the most important thing I would say is having a reference and really closely try to replicate what you see in this image. And that's a big thing which would help you get the best looking results, I'm pretty sure. So I always, when I do look dev, I always have references just to follow along, to see how light reflects on it and stuff like that. But if you get more time, okay. He's a Brit. The Brits. I never used matte painting. I always wanted to be a matte painter because I was always so inspired by these nice artworks. But I actually never used matte painting as a backdrop for my renders. At work, they do it all the time. Like, put in backdrops of landscapes, cities in the background. So, but I didn't do it myself. I don't want to go into how it is at work, so sorry, Matt. So also it has been an hour now, so I'm kind of wrapping up this live session. I'll have a few more questions, so shoot out those questions now and I'll see if I respond, and then we should be done in around 8 minutes. And I know I haven't been that active, but I would still appreciate the support on Patreon. It's just, it shows really, like, it really helps me to just get going. So I know lots of you follow my stuff, and I would really appreciate it if you became a patron. I've got lots of rewards on this, so you can just show me your support by giving $1 or whatever. And then obviously if you want more precise help from me directly, you have these different reward tiers where we do like one-on-one sessions. If I have tutorials, you can get the source materials if you have this patronship. And then obviously a live session, which a private lesson, which is where I sit down with you. If you have a certain problem, let's say you've got a lighting issue and you can't solve it, I'll sit down with you. We do a live, like you send me your scene over. I work here locally on my machine and we figure out the problem together. So this would be that. And if you're not sure what source material means, on the light shader page, it's a bit hidden, but it's in the training news. I've got the source files, and in here you've got a big overview of all the things which I give you the source files for, which is quite a lot, so you can actually work with that. Yeah. So let's see the last questions coming in. Do you use a ray switch to optimize your shaders? I do use it, not at home though. So on big productions, it's a big benefit to use a ray switch, especially if you want to have different environments reflecting. Like if you want to have a camera HDR which is high quality, and then you just want to have a blurred out reflection HDR or blurred out indirect HDR. All these things help quite a bit to speed up your renders and make them noise free. That's for sure. I use a ray switch for sure. What kind of workflow techniques would you recommend? As I myself have never been working as an environment generalist, it's hard for me to give you any tips on that, so I'm sorry. Custom LUTs. Actually, I'm planning to do a color management tutorial pretty soon. And I have no clue currently how to do custom LUTs. Hi, Nicola. Cool. So, the plan is to do add custom LUTs using OCIO or different color management techniques. So the plan is definitely there to do it. And there will be a dedicated tutorial for color management at some point in pretty near future, I would say. So, and then I will show off how to do custom LUTs. If you want to have shot grades or shot specific colors and all that stuff, I will definitely give you an insight on that. Yeah, I can actually, let me just add it to my notes to implement the ray switch to an upcoming shorter tutorial, because the ray switch shader is actually pretty simple. It's just how you connect it might be interesting. So you can see you can have different things for different ray hits, ray types. So a specular transmission type would be through the specular hit through a refraction, and diffuse would be a diffuse hit through a refraction. And then you have direct spec, indirect spec, and you can have different colors in here, but I will make a tutorial for that. That's actually a pretty good idea. So that's on the list now. So I think this sums it up. Let me just type it down. Cool. Thank guys for the feedback. I really enjoyed, and I think the next one will be actually a tutorial and not a live session. I need to find some more time to actually do tutorials. It's a bit time consuming, I guess, as you guys know. But yeah, thanks for your support. I really appreciate it. And support on trade here. I'm just reading comments still. Maya Katana, yeah. Okay, thank you guys very much, and see you in the next session or in the next tutorial. Over and out. Bye.